Wonderful. So I'm Skyler. I think many of you just heard from me on the panel. I work for a tech company here in Boston called Cogito, where we focus on augmented intelligence, or the idea of using artificial intelligence and technology to empower people to make better decisions. So we're in the world of using AI to make people more human, which is sort of an interesting use case for this technology. So today I want to talk about four areas. So the first is, what is the problem that we're focused on solving for financial service customers, and how do we approach doing that, and sort of what does augmented intelligence mean in a financial service context? And then since this is a design audience, I thought it would be fun to talk through some of the design challenges we've faced in the last 10 years as we've gone from an MIT spin-out in a DARPA research project into a fully commercialized enterprise software company. And then finally, to end on some of the value that our customers have seen, sort of where you can use augmented intelligence today in the enterprise to drive value for financial service organizations and their customers. So we've heard a lot already about customer experience, and customer experience is really important when you're a consumer of it, but it's also really important when you're an organization. So there's research from Forrester showing that for every point reduction in CX, or a customer experience score, it's $125 million. It's serious money for organizations who are having hundreds of thousands of conversations with their customers and trying to support millions of customers on an annual basis. And as we've heard throughout the day, a lot of technology approaches have been applied to help improve CX. And a lot of them have been in the automation and in the chatbot arena, where we're trying to take conversations that had happened between a person and a person and move them to more automated endeavors. And what's interesting with that is that works up to a certain point, and then you see what's called the zone of customer apathy. So the idea here, one of our customers, one of the largest credit card companies in the world, spent almost $350 million automating their CX and also automating the technology to support their CX, and found that after a certain point, it didn't get any better. And what happened here is that for consumers like us, when you are having transactional interactions with an organization, you want to check your balance. You want to put a limit on a credit card that you think you may have lost. We heard about that before lunch. You want to be able to do that quickly and efficiently. But if you're having an issue that's sort of quintessential to your being, right? If you have a fraud case, if you lost your credit card and you're in a foreign country, if you have a healthcare claim that you can't pay, you want to talk to a person about this. And you want to engage human to human to be able to solve this problem. And organizations are realizing this. They're realizing the value of the human to human interaction. Quote here from T-Mobile, instead of investing in avoiding our customers, let's focus on investing in serving them. And it turns out that you can still use technology to help provide better human-to-human interactions for your customers. And one of our customers here is MetLife, who had a wonderful article in Wired recently talking about the value of cognitive computing, where they focus on this idea of how do we use technology, how do we use AI to build better interactions with our customers, to make our employees sound more human on the phone. So why is this a hard problem? Why do humans need help sounding more human? So being empathic, coming across as caring and trustworthy in every interaction is really, really difficult. So imagine you having to call your bank because you've lost your card and you're worked up and you're upset and this conversation's not going well for you. Imagine being the person on the other end of that line who has that kind of call every single day. I was at one of our customer sites last week. They're still dealing with claims calls from the hurricanes in North Carolina and Virginia, where for the last 2 weeks, every single call this individual had taken was someone having a complete loss of their house. And imagine being the person having to make that call once versus being the person who has to receive that call over and over and over again. So it is very difficult to create emotional connections in the best of situations, but when you are having the same type of high energy, high emotions on calls over and over, you really are struggling, and you need tools that help you do that. And that's where the Cogito approach comes in. So that's where we talk about augmenting intelligence, and more specifically, augmenting emotional intelligence. And you heard Daniel Hartigan in the last panel will talk about the value of nonverbal behavior. And that's really the approach that we focus on at Cogito. So we've developed an AI engine that can automatically sense the nonverbal behaviors in phone calls. So instead of paying attention to the words that individuals are saying, we focus on the energy, the pauses, the intonation, the back channels, the interruptions that drive what a good conversation feels like. And we've all had that, a good conversation where sort of intrinsically you feel, oh, I'm connecting with somebody, right? It's hard to measure, it's hard to quantify, but when it happens, you really feel like you've built a connection with someone. So we, through millions of phone calls, have figured out effectively the algorithm for measuring that and the behaviors in the voice that can drive those types of positive outcomes. And we've taken that approach and we've embedded it within a real-time coach that gives you guidance on a call while that call is happening, so that you can know exactly what to do differently as a call center agent to be able to have a better conversation that leads to better outcomes for you because the calls that you're having aren't as dramatic or emotional, better for the customer, and leads to operational savings and revenue opportunities for the organization that you work with. So I wanted to talk a little bit about the design questions that come around this. So as I mentioned, we spun out of the MIT Media Lab. We had a team of MIT PhDs figuring out how can you measure these things in real time. How can you, in 100 milliseconds, understand if it's an interruption or a laughter? How can you understand if someone's tone is elevated or flat? And once we had that engine, we had to figure out how can we convey that information to someone while a call is happening so that we can augment their intelligence as compared to aggravate them. And the analogy that we use a lot is around driving. And you can imagine there are some tools in your car today that are really helpful and they have a really good design. One that I really like is the blind spot detections that a lot of cars have in the side view mirrors, where it's a little light that goes on. It keeps you from swerving into the lane. It's unobtrusive, but it's a light in your peripheral vision. It catches your vision. Very, very well designed. I think we've all also had the experience of you miss the exit on the highway and your GPS starts telling you, do a U-turn, do a U-turn, do a U-turn, and you're in a 4-lane highway and you're thinking, how do I turn this thing off while I don't swerve and my blind spot detection goes off, right? So that's the design problem that we were focused on, is how do we provide guidance during a call while an agent is talking to another person, they're having a conversation that can allow them to change the shape of that call in a positive sense without them going, oh my God, stop telling me to have a U-turn, stop telling me what to do, I'm trying to drive this conversation. So I want to talk through some of the design iterations that we've done in the last 10 years at Cogito to go from a very raw perspective that was very accurate in what it displayed to something that was very, very actionable for our users. So as I mentioned, we started with an ability to measure. And our first UI was focused on showing that information to users. So we could measure how quickly somebody was speaking. We could measure the energy or the variation in their voice. We had a whole team of PhDs who were telling us that distributions were far more valuable than means. So we wanted to show a heat map of information. And we showed this to users, and they went, what is good? How do I know when I'm doing a good job versus a bad job? You're telling me all this information about a call, but how do I know what good looks like? So we then took our design and went into a data approach, and through the millions of calls that we had, figured out for different contexts, for different use cases, whether it's customer service or sales, whether it's a credit card company or wealth management, to figure out what good looked like at any moment. And we ended up with even more information for the user. So this was version 2 of our technology. This is still 5 or 6 years ago. And all of a sudden, we had the ability to measure how a call was going. So we had scores every minute. We had guidance on how much you've been speaking on the left here. So if you're speaking too much or too little, you'd be in the red. There's kind of a sweet spot where we wanted the agents talking a certain percentage of the call. And then there's a lot of wonderful research about mimicry, right? And kind of mimicking someone's behavior. So we gave them opportunities to show the pace, how quickly they were speaking, as well as the tone and the energy in their voice. And all of a sudden, we took that car and we turned it into an airplane, right? Where a pilot had 50 million different gadgets and lights and blinkers, and that's why autopilot was invented for airplanes, right? And all of a sudden, there was no way for any of this information, however valuable it was, to be actionable because there was far too much to pay attention to. So we went back to the drawing board and realized we needed to pay attention to the behavioral science, and we needed to listen to all the theory around nudges, and to focus on only providing the information that was actionable at the moment that it could help drive the right behavior. So we got rid of everything and went to a system where you just get alerts, a simple notification, a simple nudge that would pop up. So then, from a UI, UX perspective, half of our team thought we had it solved. And the behavioral scientists in the room were going, wait a second, what are we going to put in there? What is an appropriate nudge for a call center agent who's on a phone call with a customer talking about financial service topics? And so we did surveys, we polled our users, we talked to buyers, and one theme that you've heard throughout the day is around trustworthiness. And wouldn't it be great if we could tell people when they aren't doing a good job of being trustworthy? So we thought about this and we mocked it up and we said, is this what you're talking about? So you're not doing a good job of being trustworthy, fix this, right? So imagine being in the middle of a call and this pops up, and needless to say, this never got past the prototyping phase, thankfully. So we thought, okay, what are other things that our customers are telling us? What are other types of technology that's focused on this? And one of the other big areas is an emotion detection. So what if we could tell when a customer was angry or when they were feeling like they weren't being listened to? And that very quickly ended up with the customer's angry idea, right? Similarly, we don't want the customer to be angry. Stop making the customer angry. This is easy. Stop doing it, right? And once again, you have a design paradigm that, while impactful in the moment, doesn't tell the agent what to do differently, right? All of a sudden, you have the co-pilot, the backseat driver in the car yelling at you, and you're frantically trying to figure out if you can merge or not, and all you want them to do is to be quiet. So what we focused on instead, and the big leap for us from a design perspective, was to think about speaking behaviors. What are the things that you can control in the moment in your own voice that you can then change in the moment? And we focused on behaviors that we knew from our huge data set that drives good behavior and that drives good outcomes. So from our data sets, we found that the energy in the agent's voice is one of the reasons why customers feel like they're not being listened to, that the agent doesn't sound trustworthy. They sound very flat. So we created the energy cue, which measures the energy in the agent's voice, and it tells you in this moment, you need to speak with more gusto, more enthusiasm in your voice. And coincidentally, when we did the data, it turns out, and I'm not making this up, it happens after lunch most often, and it happens on Thursdays most often, towards the end of the week. So right now, across the US, for the East Coast at least, there are thousands of these being sent to agents right now in call centers, because we are in the sweet spot right now for when most individuals on phone calls need to be reminded to have more energy. We also focused on hold times in situations where an agent is focused on solving a problem. They're in a CRM, they're in an information management system, desperately trying to help solve the problem for a user, but they've lost track of time. They've lost their ability to keep track of time. So we have a very simple called extended silence, where it just says, check in, let them know you're still trying to help solve their problem. This makes the call shorter, and it also drives a huge improvement in customer satisfaction. So when we combined all of this together, we now have a system that provides real-time live behavioral guidance. We have a suite of notifications that cover a variety of speaking behaviors that an individual can control in the moment. And we are able to relate these behaviors through our large data sets to the outcomes that our customers care about. And what's fascinating about this is when you apply this technology, you can get both operational efficiency and improvements in customer satisfaction. So what we found is when you build a trust and rapport early in the conversation, individuals ask less follow-up questions. They believe the information that they're seeing. So you see reductions in handle time and average call length, enormous multi-million-dollar operational savings for large financial service organizations. Simultaneously, they report improvements in customer satisfaction and in net promoter score because they feel like they've been heard and they feel like their problem has been solved. What's fascinating about this is this approach of building trust and rapport and higher emotional intelligence early in a call also drives other outcomes besides customer service. So we've applied this in other business units and seen improvements in sales outcomes as well. And this is for one of the world's largest global insurance customers. We've seen the same in wealth management, in credit card companies, healthcare, and health insurance as well. So Cogito today is focused on providing this technology, providing these services exclusively to the world's largest organizations. We work in large financial services, large healthcare, and large insurance. And we're backed by some of the most successful companies in the world, including Salesforce.com and Goldman Sachs. Thank you.
All right, Skyler, we've got some great questions here. I'm going to throw the first one your way. Is rep dissonance ever a factor? Which is to say, the technology says I'm not being friendly enough, but I don't feel that way.
Yeah, so I mentioned this a little bit in the last segment around coaching and providing augmentation without taking away autonomy. And the idea here is we very much word our notifications and our recommendations to be exactly that, to be recommendations, to not be prescriptive, precise, you have to do this or else. So what we found is that this tool, the agents really actually enjoy using it because they find it to be empowering. And they find that it gives them greater control than scripts do, which is another approach that's used to try to maintain a standard of emotional intelligence in a call. And that they're able to ignore them when they disagree with them, and they're able to use them when they find them valuable.
Okay. Our next question, how do cultural differences in conversation styles get programmed in? So, for example, in some cultures, interrupting is seen differently.
Absolutely. So we have sort of an out-of-a-box standard where we have a good understanding for different contexts what good looks like. And then as the system is utilized in different contexts, in different languages, the system learns. And it figures out these patterns over time and it adapts. So for example, we have a speaking quickly notification in there, if anyone caught that. That's one of our learning algorithms because quickly for one person and quickly for one culture is going to be perceived differently. So that is a system where the definition of good is modulated and learns over time for different call centers for different parts of the world.
So related to that then, how do you deal with that localization in language as a second language as part of the technology? Yeah,
so one of the fascinating parts about this approach is that we ignore the words that people say. So we focus on the energy, the pauses, the intonation. If we had the system running live while I was talking and someone who speaks another language came up and started talking with me, it would just work. It would recognize the same patterns. It would recognize the same aspects of the conversation. Those norms are different, however, and that's where we have sort of a tuning process that we do when the system's running in German, for example, versus in Spanish. But the underlying technology works out of the box on the first call for a whole variety of languages.
Next question. Do you find differences in how well agents are able to adjust based on the feedback that's provided? And a related question, how does the robo-coach help or hinder the human coaching of the agents?
Yeah, so let me answer those separately because they're both really interesting questions. So one item that Daniel Hartigan in the last presentation mentioned is around how hard it is to be consciously aware of some of these nonverbal aspects of your voice, which is to say you may be the world's best public speaker, and when you get up here on the first two slides, you may start talking quickly without realizing it every single time. And it turns out that in situations where you have a lot of cognitive overload or a lot of effort that you're putting in, whether you're on a stage or you're answering the same call over and over and over again, it becomes really difficult for you to recognize these nonverbal aspects of your voice. So what does that mean? It means for agents who have been using this technology for 2 years, they still have calls where they are interrupting or where they're speaking too quickly in the moment where the Cogito technology gives them a nudge and allows them to change their behavior. So you can remind individuals over and over again, speak more slowly, enunciate. But in situations that are stressful or high impact, people lose the ability to be self-aware of that. And I'm laughing because the joke with my team is that I am a monologuer. I keep on talking. And we have a speaking too much notification at work. That's a physical printout that they hold up in meetings. And I'm standing here going, you're literally doing it again, Skyler. You're giving way too long of an answer to a question. So it is a technology that is impactful on every call for agents who are either at their first day in the job or have been there for 10 years because of this limitation in human cognition to recognize and process and modulate this ability. I think the second question was around coaching. And what's really interesting, so in today's most call centers, there's a very important role, which is the supervisor, who is an individual who manages a set of agents. And oftentimes they listen in on calls, they provide guidance on what to do differently. And what I shared with you today is very much the real-time live guidance that the agents utilize. We have a similar display that we provide to supervisors so that they can see the behaviors of their agents as they're happening in real time and the trends of those behaviors. So they can say, okay, Skyler, we know you're a monologuer. You spend too long explaining answers. Let's focus on that for the next 2 weeks. Let's look at how your scores in Cogito are changing. Is that notification appearing less often because you've been able to actually recognize that and respond to it faster. So the approach is actually really empowering for coaching, for human coaching, because they have a set of tools that measures this soft skill and this emotional intelligence that previously was always sort of described in a very ad hoc way, and no one ever knew what the things were that they were good at or that they were bad at. So it's a huge improvement for coaching as well.